It is not uncommon to observe, in conflict situations, parties who persist in strategies, even though these strategies undoubtedly have no desirable outcomes. This tendency of the parties to persist in behaviors that are harmful to them is explained through the phenomenon of escalation of commitment, which is also called commitment bias. Escalation of commitment is defined as the fact that individuals persist in behaviors that experience has clearly shown to be doomed to failure and whose costs continue to increase. An illustrative example of commitment bias is provided by the Vietnam War. During this war, the US initially committed a little more than 50,000 soldiers. Over the years, due to loss of life, the Johnson administration continued to send again and again new troops until it reached the exorbitant figure of more than 500,000 soldiers. As this example dramatically illustrates, with this type of escalation, the more numerous the losses, the more difficult it becomes to accept them, and the more the parties are tempted to invest in the conflict to try to recover, if not symbolically, these lost funds. In everyday conflicts, commitment bias is quite similar. We observe, for example, people sinking into conflicts whose emotional, relational, and financial costs are sometimes extremely expensive, as when parties already defeated in the courts, for example, decide to invest still more time and more money in legal fights, which are literally lost in advance. From a psychological point of view, the escalation of commitment is explained by the desire that we have to be consistent with ourselves, and by the pressure we feel to justify, at least in our own eyes, if not in the eyes of the others, our past behaviors. This pressure to justify our behaviors and to be consistent with ourselves is particularly important if, for example, we have already invested a lot in the behavior, or if our behavior was public rather than private. In short, the more I have invested, the stronger the feeling of loss will be, and the more I will be tempted to invest even more to try to recover what I have already lost. And when I talk about investment, it can be money for sure, but it can also be time or energy. Another observation is that commitment bias is much stronger when the image of people is at stake or when their self-esteem is threatened. We sometimes pursue strategies that are doomed to failure simply because we do not want to admit defeat or because we fear being humiliated by backing down. In contrast, escalation of commitment is less likely when we foresee the future regrets that the persistence of the behavior might imply.